I wanted to take advantage of the Avid S1 high-resolution faders to use them in Max MSP. You can't do that with the Yukon protocol, but turns out there's a very simple way to do it. On a Mac, go to your system preferences. Not sure what the equivalent is on Windows, but you have to find the Yukon preferences, essentially, which is not the same as the uControl settings, by the way. In this window, we're going to drag whatever application we want the S1 to communicate with, not with Yukon, but with Mackie Control. Mackie Control, as far as I know, is pretty much standard MIDI. So essentially, Macs will see the S1 as an ordinary MIDI controller. So if you go to your Finder and find your Macs app, you literally take it and drop it here. I'm not going to do that now because after you do this, you need to reboot your computer, but I'm screen capturing, so that's not going to work. So you just drag and drop it, reboot, open a new Macs patch, and create a MIDI in object. Command double-click the object and select Euphonics port 1. That's where the S1 will transmit its data. So if I create a print object now and connect it to MIDI in, when I move anything on the S1, it'll come out of the MIDI in. I can push the buttons, I can do anything I want. And it just like any ordinary MIDI controller, it's there. So the key to this whole operation here is going to be an object called XBendIn, which, as the description reads, will interpret extra precision MIDI pitch bend values. What I think is happening in Yukon and in Yukon in general is they are summing two MIDI messages, just like a keyboard controller does for the pitch bend wheel. It sums two messages so that it doesn't output 7-bit, but 14-bit values. And I think that happens for each fader in a Yukon controller. So just like in a pitch bend wheel, it'll be 14-bit MIDI values. This object helps interpret 14-bit MIDI values. So if we connect it to MIDI in, this object will give out two sets of values. Rather, I'm going to create an integer object for each outlet. The left outlet will put out the actual values of the fader, the 14-bit pitch bend values. The right outlet will put out MIDI channel, because every fader is assigned to one channel, so a different channel. The fader 1 will be on channel 1, fader 2 on channel 2, and so on up to 8. So a few things you will notice here. First of all, these are a lot of values. Clearly, this is not a 7-bit MIDI message. But also, I'm not sure this is actually a 14-bit message. I mean, the message probably is 14-bit, but I think there is some filtering going on in the hardware because MIDI faders can be noisy. So if I move the fader very slowly, which is not easy to do, but you will see that the values jump. It's like it will jump 30-something values at a time. So I'm going to scale the output of these values, and I'm going to scale it with the scale object. I'm going to go 0 to 16368, which is the maximum value put out by the fader, to 0 to 1023, because a 10-bit MIDI message would be 1024 values. And the reason why I'm doing 16,368, which the eagle-eyed viewers will know that it's not a full 14-bit MIDI message, that would be 384. It's because I think the fader, when you drop it to 12 and then leave it, goes back. So I think that bit of dead space is just kind of not recognized. And this, by the way, happens with any DAW that I've used that is not Pro Tools. The last bit is dead. I don't know how to fix that, or if it can even be fixed. So now that I've scaled it, it goes from 0 to 1023. If I move it very slowly, which is not easy again, it jumps one, sometimes two values at a time. Depends on the fader and depends on the point, the fader, the position in the throw of the fader. It doesn't bother me. If it does, you can smooth it with a line object or scale it down further to a 9-bit message. I mean, 1,000 values in a 100mm fader are 10 values per millimeter. Those are still a lot of values. That's a very high resolution message compared to a 7-bit message. So this works. This is good enough for me. The next thing to do is to route each fader to a different destination. So how do we do that? The elegant way to do this would be to create some complex routing and packing and unpacking system in Max. I'm going to spend 2 days trying to figure that out. So instead, I'm going to use the brute force, which means I'm going to create a set of objects per each fader. Before we do that, though, we need to filter what the object puts out. And if you give it an argument, that argument will be the MIDI channel that we want the object to see. So if I give it an argument of 1, this object will only put out values from fader 1. Anything else is not going to come out of this object. So I'm going to take this set of objects. Let's go a little higher here. And duplicate it so that I have 8 of these. Oh, you know what? I'm going to do something first. I'm going to shrink this real small. There you go. I'm going to duplicate these now. And that's pretty good. It's all right. Now, I'm going to change the argument to each of these so there's going to be one of these per each fader. And if you know a faster way to do this kind of bulk operations in Max, I'd like to know because I feel like an idiot every time. There you go. So I have 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8. I'm going to connect all of these to the MIDI in object. Now, each fader has its own lane, so to speak. You can, of course, move them all at the same time. And there are a couple of cool things here. First of all, if I jump from Max to Pro Tools or any other DAW, can be in Pro Tools, work in Pro Tools, move my faders, bank back and forth. And once I go back to Max, the motorized faders are still working. So they will remember the position you leave them in, which is pretty cool because Max is essentially just like any hardware instrument. The faders will always reflect what you see on the screen. And I think that's great. I haven't tried sending values to the fader to make them move. So if you have, some other things changing the value of whatever the destination of the fader is, and you want the fader to reflect that, I think it can be done with the MIDI out object, but I haven't tried it. And one last thing that might be useful to you is this. The MIDI in object can take an argument, which is the port it will read from. So if I write the name of the port in quotes here, which is Euphonic MIDI Euphonics port 1, Euphonics MIDI Euphonics port 1, make sure caps and all match. Every time I launch this patch, it'll automatically select this as my MIDI input port. So Max is, again, it's just like a hardware instrument now. Launch the patch. If the S1 is on, this is a hardware instrument. Responds smoothly and perfectly. I can go to my DAW and I can go back to Max and everything is where it's supposed to be, which I think is pretty cool.